Hello, my friends! Thank you so much for joining me for another virtual meetup. And I'm so grateful that I have this opportunity to share with you the project that I am working on. It is an enormous project. To be honest, I did not anticipate it being so intricate and involved, but I am learning so much, and this is such an important project to me personally. This is actually not the first time that I am sharing some of this progress with you. I have made a previous time-lapse video where I shared a pencil page that I made. In this video, I am showing you an ink page. I'm going to talk a little bit later about the two different techniques that I use and why I'm doing that. I just want to keep all my ideas together so I don't forget what I want to say. I want to take a bit of advice from Linda Barry. And if you don't know who she is, I think we should dedicate a future video on her. But she's awesome. And she said that whenever you have to do any kind of public speaking, you must begin with the most terrifying thing, which is singing, according to her, and then everything else will be smooth on out from then on out. So I am going to see if I can do it. Here it goes.
My oom se motor is 'n ou masjien. Hy maak dit vol met dieselien en hy sing in die strate as hy ons kom sien. My oom is oud en ek is skaars 13. My oom drink koffie en my tannie tee. Ek vra oor die reën en hy sê ja nee. En hy drink soet koffie met sy een oog toe. En hy praat weer oor die drie van mannetjies roep. O, stuur ons net so bietjie reën. My oom het 'n tank vol dieselien. En sien my pa, en sien my ma, en my oom op sy plaas in Afrika. Maar my oom het gesukkel op die plaas, want die son was te warm en die reën te skaars. En die man van die bank het net sy kop geskud, want my oom, ja my oom was te diep in die skuld. My oom se motor is 'n ou masjien. Hy maak dit vol met dieselien en hy ry na die lande in die oggenddauw. Die lande val en sy oë grauw. O, stuur ons net so bietjie reën. My oom het 'n tank vol dieselien. En sien my pa, en sien my ma, en my oom op sy plaas in Afrika. En as jy in die oggend in die lande stap, hoor jy nog sy motor met sy klak, 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 maar my oom, ja my oom se hoes nou al by toe. In sy brief stuur hy groete aan mannetjies roep. O stuur ons net so bietjie reën, my oom met 'n denkvol disalien, en sien my pa, en sien my ma, en my oom op sy plaas in Afrika.
Okay, I did it. This is actually a very sad song. You might have caught that from the melody. But the reason why this song is resonating right now is because the song is about living in Africa, and the water is scarce in Africa. Droughts are frequent, and we here, people in Africa are very dependent upon agriculture, on farming life. And the story is also, the song, which is like a story, is told from the perspective of a young girl, and she goes and visits her uncle on this farm, and he begins out to be this very jovial, jolly man, and then obviously the drought hits them, and because of that drought, he in the end loses his farm. But he keeps on trying to find hope in his situation, and that is why he keeps on referring to Manikis Roo, who was a rugby player at that time. So this story that I'm writing, this graphic memoir, is also actually stems from the same period of time. So that's 1938. And like in the song, there was this huge drought at the beginning of the decade, and it was the Great Depression. Lots of people lost their jobs, and people also had strong ties with farms. Either they still owned farms and lived on farms, or they recently lost farms, or they had family who owned a farm. So the people have a very strong connection to the land. The first video was, I spoke a bit about the theme of the story, and as anybody who's ever written anything know, it's not that easy. Books are involved, stories are involved, stories take you on routes that you did not anticipate. Although you have a fairly good idea of what you want to achieve and where you want the story to go, every book or every story reaches a point where the story begins to dictate what it wants to say. And I really experience it with this book as well. To be frank, it has taken a turn that I did not anticipate at all. For one, I feature in the book, and I deliberately did not want to feature in the book from the start. My initial idea was not that I was going to be a voice in that book, but I turned out to be one of the narrating voices. That has been an interesting surprise. And in this video, I want to talk a bit more about my style choices and what I'm doing and how the process is working. Anybody who doesn't know, the book is a graphic memoir. So you might ask, well, what is a graphic memoir? A graphic memoir is, if we break down the word, a memoir is oh my goodness, I'm getting so tongue twisted here. What is a graphic memoir, you might ask? Well, a graphic memoir is a memoir. And what is a memoir? So a memoir is a story that is biographical in nature, but biographies tend to cover the whole lifespan of a person, whereas a memoir is something that is a story or is a book that is written of a certain period or time frame of a person's life. Some people also write memoirs when they're not at old age, so there's still a lot of life expectancy ahead of them if they're the ones telling the story. That is what a memoir is. So this is a memoir. It is capturing a time period, and it's capturing a part of my grandmother's story. She is the inspiration for this story, and it is a tribute to her. Although she has become a narrating voice and the story itself has expanded to include other voices. And what is a graphic memoir, then you might ask? Well, if you know what comics are, or if you ever heard the term a graphic novel, then you will know what I mean. So it's basically a picture sequence story or a sequential pictorial story. It does not need to have speech balloons, but mine does. So there's usually a combination of text with imagery, but it doesn't even need that. It's a very strongly visually driven story. The imagery tells a part of the story that words cannot articulate. And that is why I chose the graphic memoir as the means to tell this story, because it allowed me that freedom to tell a non-linear story, and you get multiple voices that contribute to an essence, to a feeling in the end. I'm not someone who grew up reading comics, and that might seem surprising to people if they see that I am now using this format and this medium as a tool to tell this story. The first graphic novel that I read was Mouse by Art Spiegelman. Or maybe you pronounce his surname Spiegelman. It is the most wonderful story, and I was completely captivated by the book and the story and that way of telling stories. And it made the Second World War and it made the Holocaust so real in a way that, and personal in a way that I never, in any other documentary, in any other image of people, of refugees and camp survivors, that none of those images could achieve. I think it is because we are saturated by images, ironically, that we become desensitized, and you need that power of the illustration to transfer the message for you. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but that is how I experienced the book and how I experienced this as a medium. It's a wonderful book, and if you are ever able to find it, you must go and read it if you haven't. It is really one of the canonical books of graphic novel genre. And it is written in black and white. It's got no color. The illustration is so strong. That black and whiteness of it, it's just, there's something captivating about that is just haunting. And like I said, that illustrated interpretation of the story made it stronger. The Jews are depicted as mice, and the Nazis are depicted as cats. And then you get other ordinary citizens being depicted as other animals. So it also, through that, connects to somehow to Animal Farm and other anthropomorphical, it's a tongue twister for me. I don't know how to pronounce that right now. Now you know why I am a visual artist and I need visual imagery, because words sometimes fail me. Yes, so it's just a wonderful book, and it opened up my eyes to this as a storytelling medium. I've always been fascinated with stories, and I believe that stories in connection with imagery, with visual art, is what makes it more memorable. I also want to talk about the choice of medium, of both mediums, pencil and ink. I decided from the beginning that since the story has two voices, it has the voice of my grandmother from the past, and it has the voice of me as an adult, and as a critical adult, as a doubting adult, and her voice as a child's voice when she was about 9 years old, and also as this excited, rosy-colored child. So they create a contrast in terms of narrative voice. And because of that, I wanted to visually also show a difference between the two voices. And that is why you see the voice of the child in pencil. It's a softer medium, and that tonal ranges that you get, those grays, it's just a lot more soft to the eye. And then the adult voice, which is more critical, so it's more harsh, there's a higher contrast to the viewpoint, and that is then displayed in black and white in ink. So therefore I used two different mediums. So pencil for the voice of the child pages, and ink for the voice of the adult pages. And finally, in the last chapter, that those two voices merge, where everything becomes, the voice of the child becomes an ink voice. You cannot really distinguish between the two. I got the idea of using the visual narration from the graphic artist David Mazzucchelli in his book Asterios Polyp. I don't know if I pronounced that in the way that it's meant to, but it's also a masterful book. He's very well known for his work for Batman. And this is a personal story. It is a love story between a man and a woman, and they have these two very different outlooks or perspectives of life. And he masterfully created two different visual aesthetics for each character. So the main character, the man, he is drawn in, and he's also an architect, if I remember correctly. And yes, he's an architect professor, and he's drawn in structural lines, whereas the woman is drawn in a lot more round, curvy kind of lines. And then on pages where they intersect and where they really connect with one another, that kind of aesthetic indifference blurs a little bit. And then at times where they pull apart, it becomes more prominent again. He used a limited color palette of purples, blues, yellow, and pink. And yeah, he just did it so masterfully, this relationship between these two opposites. I don't have any color in my work. I kept it to gray and black. because of the influence of mouse, because of the influence of story, and there's an element of grimness to it. And also I sometimes color is so powerful, sometimes color can distract you. So I didn't want to use color specifically in this project. I also use a lot of pattern because pattern tells historical stories. We get certain patterns from certain eras, and patterns become stronger if they're in colorless or they're in black and white. And I also used recipes as another medium of telling the story of a time period. Lastly, I would like to refer to what I am drawing specifically on this page that you are looking at in this video. After the first year of the war, the British realized they weren't going to win this war easily, and Kitchener implemented a policy of scorched earth and forced encampment. What this meant was that all people from the farms were removed. So all women, children, and elderly and farm workers were collected by British soldiers and taken to concentration camps. And their farms were destroyed. Their homes were burned down to the ground, and all farmland, all fields, cultivated fields were burned until there's nothing left. All the farm animals were killed, and so that literally there's just the soil left, the dry soil. So after the war, when these families returned to their homesteads, there was nothing left and they had to rebuild everything from scratch. Emily Hobhouse was a British woman of a good family, and she heard about these concentration camps and she wanted to visit some of the concentration camps during her stay in South Africa. She received a pass to go and visit the concentration camps. At first, she was completely shocked to discover that there was more than 1 or 2 odd concentration camps, but these concentration camps were littered across the country, across Transvaal, across the Free State, Natal, and in the Eastern Cape. Secondly, she was shocked to discover the living conditions of the people in these concentration camps. Their food was contaminated with glass shards and with metal bits in some of the concentration camps. The food was of poor quality. It was very little. There was no sanitation. There was very little water. They only lived in tents. There was no insulation against the cold at night. And because of all these conditions, many people died in the concentration camps. Hobhouse was completely appalled, and she appealed to the British government to receive grants to provide at least kettles for the people so that they could boil water and that the water would be of better quality, and also that they received soap. Hobhouse was the torch that made the general public, the British public, realize that these concentration camps weren't as wonderful as the military wanted to make them believe. She received a lot of opposition in her own country because of her involvement and her plight for these people in the concentration camps. After the war, the Afrikaans people honored Hobhouse by collecting money and sending it to her so she could buy a house in Cornwall. And after her death, her remains got sent to South Africa, and she is buried at the bottom of the Women's Monument in Bloemfontein. Thank you so much for joining me today and for supporting me and supporting my work. I hope I can share with you more of this in the near future. in the very near future. Have a good day and okay, bye.